Good morning, viewers. Welcome to Frankly Speaking with Vibhuti Jha. As always, we always discuss the impact implications of events that happen in our lives. And today we are going to talk about some remarkably significant events that we observed on August 5th, a remarkable day for India, for all Indians, Hindus, and the implications of the things that happened on that day. One was the Bhumi Puja of Ram Mandir was performed. It was globally celebrated by all Indians, even if there were some who were in the opposition. But by and large, majority of Indians were very happy. Even in New York City, in Washington, DC, there were celebrations of Ram Janmabhoomi Shilanyas. The other element which is very important and critical is that we are also observing the first anniversary of abrogation of Article 370, 35A in Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, as I always say, JKL. That's the state. And it has had definitely global implication, so much so that in the United States, there were many tiny civil councils have passed resolutions against India on 370 CAA as if the minority rights have been violated. We will talk about that, and also we'll touch upon certainly on the US elections. And one of the important elements that we want to talk about also is the fact that why is it that most of the Indians are Democrats, they vote Democrats. In reality, is this the time for Democrats, Indian Democrats to change sides? Why must Indians be committed to voting for Democratic Party, which has not been most friendly for India or issues that are important for us? So much so that the Democratic nominee for president's position, Mr. Joe Biden, has adopted a remarkably anti-India stand on the democratic processes that were followed in India, passed by its parliament, the laws in India. So we'll touch upon this. And for this, I have great pleasure in welcoming Mr. Rakesh Kaul, whom some of you know, who has been on my program a couple of times to discuss Kashmir issue. And Rakesh is not only a very prolific Kashmiri, successful Kashmiri in the United States, he is a very devout Indian. And he has been CEO, executive position in several companies. He's an author, he's an entrepreneur, and he's a remarkable human being because he does so many things that impacts us day in and day out. So Rakesh ji, welcome to the show. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Vibhuti ji, for the warm welcome and cheery good morning to your audience today.
Yes, of course. Thank you. So let's begin with one very important element. That's August 5th. And how do we define that? In my opinion, as I find it, is that, it has, the Ram Janmabhoomi thing has been a remarkably significant event because it has brought about a oneness in all Indians. It has united, it has integrated the Indians, and also the unification that it has brought about in terms of stating our own values. And, it has had repercussions all over the world because there is a very false narrative being touted. And I say touted because it is exactly that. As if the 500-year-old mosque was demolished by Hindus without recognizing the fact that the mosque was built after demolishing a Hindu temple. The proof of that was given by none other than a Muslim chief of Archaeological Survey of India. So share your thoughts and also touch upon the fact that second stage, we will talk about the Kashmir part of it. So hit off and tell us what you feel is the significance of the Ram Mandir August 5th, the way it has shaped up.
So I think August 5th, historians will look at it as the day which represents the rebirth of what I call as Ram consciousness. These massive movements, Vibhuti ji, when they happen, they don't happen for property disputes. Hindus don't do these things out of a sense of uh, religious territoriality. Ram consciousness represents a search for higher ideals in public life and governance. And it is that idea that has caught fire in the imagination of not just Hindus, but Indians. And I predict that the falling ideals in public life, in public governance that we have seen after World War II will now, in the form and symbol of Ram, become appealing to the rest of humanity. So this is a very, very, very important day. And my prediction is that just as Krishna consciousness went global, that Ram consciousness will also go global. And this is going to be the beginning. August 5th will be the day we look back.
Oh, so beautifully said. And that's what I feel, that Mr. Ram is known as Maryada Purushottam Ram, as we Hindus call him. And he was Maryada Purushottam for a reason, because he upheld the values of human life, the dignity of promises made, and the dignity of promises kept. It is very, very sad that we talk about in the modern parlance, promises are meant to be broken. But here was a man who withstood and upheld all the promises that he had made to his father and the family. And it has a remarkable understanding amongst the world around us that the stepwife, the second or third wife of Dasharath ji, who took advantage of a vow to banish him to the forest, her own son refused to become the crowned king. And he ruled the country and the state by putting his kharao, as the Hindi word is, but for the English-speaking audience, it is the footwear of Ramji on the throne, and he governed with that image. Now, these are things that are unheard of the 21st century Western world that we know, that there can be people who uphold values. And that's what is important. My learning, my study of Ramcharitmanas and Ramayana tells me only one thing, that in the entire text, no commentary or comment has been made on anybody as a person. But the lesson that we learn is that every action has a consequence, and people have to bear and live with that consequence. The accountability factor comes in. So Kaikeyi had to live with the consequence of her choices or her deceptions. And in Mahabharata also, Shakuni or Dronacharya or everybody had to live with the consequence of their action by supporting or being part of adharma over dharma. And that's the beautiful lesson that the world needs to learn today, is that while there is a democracy, which is one of the, as the saying goes, democracy is the best amongst all the worst forms of government. Perhaps a time has come for us to introduce the concept of dharmocracy, because individually and culturally, every individual knows when he is doing a good thing or a bad thing. It doesn't require rocket science to figure that out. When we do something wrong or right, we know that we are doing the right thing or the wrong thing. So in that process, you are absolutely right that the Ram consciousness, bringing that to the world, is perhaps the biggest responsibility of all Indians, Hindus included in it, is to teach the world and reach out to the world with our message, that there is a message, there is a meaning of dharma, and dharma has to be upheld.
But everybody has his most favorite story about Ramayana. Let me take a minute and share with you what Ram consciousness means to me. Now, dharma is associated with Gita, and Krishna is associated with Gita, and Krishna is associated with Gyan Yoga. But when Ram and Ravan were engaged in an existential battle, every time Ram slew one of Ravan's heads, a new one would grow. And that battle was so fierce that Ravan was exhausted and he fainted. Now, unlike the pivotal scene in the picture behind me, Ram does not take advantage of Ravan when he has fainted. Ram waits. And when Ravan is revived and his charioteer is ready now with him to go into battle, do you know how Ravan was killed?
Yes, the Nabi thing. Yeah.
He was killed with the Brahmastra. Now, this weapon, remember, yes, Ravan had asked that his head and his arms, which he thought were his source of power and strength, should be indestructible. What he forgot was his heart. And it is in his heart that the Brahmastra pierced. And so Ram tells us that what you have to have in public life is not just Gyan, not just Dharma, but you have to have those values that can only come from your heart. And Ram consciousness represents, as you correctly said, the highest ideals of humanity. But it's uncompromising because Ram is a Kshatriya. He is a warrior, right, and he has no compunction. So it's a great day. You will see beautiful things come out of it. And you and I will travel together to Ayodhya for the inauguration of the temple one day.
Oh, that's a promise I will definitely keep. In the spirit of Ramji, we will definitely keep. Yes. One of the things which is very important is that, it has impacted people in a very different way. Politically speaking, Hindus have suffered, the Indians have suffered a lot in the last 1,000 years of Islamic assault, followed by a very surreptitious, corrupt East India Company that was a trading company and acquired us and distributed and broke India as if it was their ancestral property. Mm-hmm. And in the process, we know that there were thousands and thousands of temples were destroyed. Now, Ramji's Mandir, kind of has deflated the Hindu mind. We had been combating, what is known as combating the negative thoughts that has beset us, that how did this all happen to us? So this conscious awareness of Ram's temple being rebuilt, because I personally believe who surrenders the birthplace of your Lord or your Bhagwan to a judicial process of 20th and 21st century? Only we could have done that. And we won that judicial process through dharmic way. It was not that we said, get out of here. We said, let's have it out. You are alluding to that. You mentioned that when the evil was down, Ravan was down, Ram did not kill him at that time, but he got him up. So we fought all the legal battles to assert ourselves. And that's the beauty of this entire thing, in my opinion, that it has definitely brought about a different consciousness amongst us all. The celebrations all over the world, in India itself, it cut across all barriers. So the entire thing which I feel is it has brought a unity, it has brought integration, and it has created a sense of oneness amongst all Indians.
Vibhuti Ji, let me repeat again what you said in a slightly more emphatic way.
Okay.
It is only in India that through peaceful ways, this great country got its independence from a colonial empire, right?
Right.
Gandhi
Absolutely.
led that, right? It is only in India that this great civilization recovered the birthplace of its Lord after a 400-year contest. That is unbelievable. We're such a peaceful people. We're such a peaceful people that we spent 400 years to get to our goal. Never, ever did we give up. And we have righted the wrong. We were not perfect. Ram was not perfect, but in the long arc of human history, it will be unparalleled, the story of Ram Janmabhoomi.
And that is remarkably true also because it bestows on us an opportunity as well as the responsibility to convey this profound message to the rest of the world. Rest of the world talks about, we have been attacked, by various groups, including a remarkable use of English word that Indian American diaspora has opposed with the help of some, I would say, unseemingly, untruthful people to give the narrative to the rest of the world that it was a mosque that was destroyed and we are celebrating that. That's not true. And we have, as all the people here in America and in India, we have to convey the message to the world that we upheld the principles of Ramarajya and democracy together, that we fought for 400 years for the judicial process, the dharma process to take its own route and make it happen. And that's very uplifting for people like you and I and the rest of them who are today, wondering if it was ever going to happen. That is very important. And I feel that this also, speaking on the 21st century perspective, it has also exposed various people in a remarkable way. Call it Ram's game, call it divine intervention, or call it just getting caught with their pants down. So All India Muslim Personal Law Board and other organizations, they had all along maintained that we will accept the Supreme Court ruling, whatever it is. But soon as the ruling comes, the Muslim Personal Law Board says that, well, we will demolish that and we'll come back again. And they are no longer accepting the Supreme Court verdict. That exposes them. And that brings me to another point, that Hindu-Muslim unity or Hindu-Muslim relationship, how will it impact that? Although I know by personal experience, there are many Muslims who are very happy about that. But then there are certain, as the saying goes, that extreme fringes drive the narrative of the middle. How do we control that? How do we let them not create the false narrative to the rest of the world? Because there are many vested interests. Nobody talks about the Turkish acquisition of the church, 500-year-old church, which was a museum, and now they have converted it into a mosque. Not one person from any Islamic country or otherwise have said anything about that. But Ram Masjid is a demolition of the Muslim minority, as if they have been harassed beyond Earth's capacity.
I think that this question about what impact will it have on Hindu-Muslim relationships, my own prediction is that very, very little, very little. It'll be something that the maggots, I'm sorry to use the term maggots, but that's a graphic description of those people who feed on the festering wounds of history and try to make a living out of it and a name out of it. Yeah, they'll fester, but the Muslims in Ayodhya are going to be very supportive of it. They're going to build their own mosque because as part of the judgment, they get to do that, and they'll build a beautiful mosque. So they're happy because many of them they are shopkeepers, traders, businessmen. The royal descendant of Babur from day one has said, look, this was Ram Ayodhya's place and the temple should be built. So this is all going to die out very, very fast. And the only people who will make noises are, as I said, the people whose job is to be the maggots of society. Hindu-Muslim relationships actually will come out of it stronger because they will have closed this chapter. And this was a chapter that was frankly important to the Hindus. And you know what? not very important to the Muslims, except for very confused people. And you mentioned the personal law board folks. They were the people who linked up with Rajiv Gandhi to open the
Right.
doors initially. So talk
Right.
about a hypocrisy. These people are very unprincipled people. They're just trying to fight for whatever little short life they have left because, the country is moving forward with the uniform civil law code, and that'll just put an end to their existence because really the country should have one law for every citizen. Doesn't matter what religion, faith, or whether you're an atheist. Why should laws be different? And we're going to end up with a uniform civil code. So, they're looking at an end game which is not very pretty for them.
I totally agree with you. I think by and large, I think everybody knows people take a strong stand that, we will not let this happen, but inevitable things, they do happen, inevitably speaking. So the point of the matter also is very important here is that Ram Mandir was a remarkable opportunity, in my opinion, for Muslims to showcase their generosity. Because whatever it was, there was no comparison between Ram Mandir and Babri Mosque. Now, Babri Mosque, many people do not know that Babri was not Babur. Babri was a 16-year young man who was Babur's concubine. And because he died, he built that mosque, dedicated it to his lover. Now, there can't be any comparison, and this is a very touchy subject. And there comes a moment in time when you have to touch upon this touchy subject because the truth must come out. Because even the Muslims must acknowledge this fact that that was not a holy mosque in any case. The resistance that happened against that entire thing was also very important. The world must know that it was not a holy place. It was a mausoleum for, just as Taj Mahal is reportedly a mausoleum for Shah Jahan's lover, Shah Jahan's wife Mumtaz Begum. But the reality may be very different. Who knows? But other part which I'm talking about also here is that Ramcharitmanas, Ramayana, Bhagwan Ram, the entire family structure is a massive lesson of sacrifice, of brotherhood, of relationships. These get enforced with this victory. And I think I totally agree with you that Ram consciousness, maybe Ram Rajya will take a longer time to arrive, but Ram consciousness coming, just like Krishna consciousness, you very aptly put it, the world will have to recognize that Ram consciousness is also establishment of dharma in more ways than one. So share with us, in the modern context as we see it, what is the responsibility of every Indian? How do we take this message to the world? Because we are not the kind of people who proselytize, who talk about ourselves. We don't talk about our glorious past. We always remain quiet and hesitant. How does that character change happen for us to take this story to the world in front of us?
So, every society has its heroes. In America, it's the mythical cowboy, the lone individual against the system. And we have glorified that. And in Japan, it's the samurai warrior.
Right.
In other cultures, it's the holy martyr, warrior, whatever. And so every culture has that. And I think the time has come to begin to help the world understand what the highest warriors of humanity really are. And we are the ones who have to take the story of Rama to the world. And we have taken yoga to the world. We have to take the story of Rama to the world. But to take the story of Rama to the world, the first thing we should do is read the Ramayana.
Ourselves.
Ourselves. And understand what it means as a text. See, Ram and Krishna are very interesting. Ram is a human who often forgets that he is divine, who's often despondent. So we relate to him in a very human way, who suffers losses. Krishna, by contrast, never forgets he's divine. He always has an upaya. He is very different. But Ram is someone that you can relate to, who hasn't lost something very precious, who hasn't experienced injustice, who hasn't tried to go through their life and face the obstacles that Ram has faced. So you can relate to Ram. And yet, what Ram tells us is that if you're true to your values, you will triumph. And it's something extraordinary. Just like Ahimsa, winning India, independence, was extraordinary. The world still cannot accept that we did it. The world still is filled with wonder. And Ram will fill people with wonder, this notion of somebody who treats everybody equally, treats people compassionately, who fights for justice. He's not perfect, but he is the best that there is.
And that's why he is called Maryada Purushottam.
That's right.
And that is the important part. And that is the message I would say that we all must take to the world in front of us.
Right.
That the reason why he was called Maryada Purushottam is very divine and very inspiring, because you can always overcome the odds if you stuck to the path of dharma. Yes. And that's a beautiful lesson in there. This also brings me to the modern era that we live in.
Yes.
And that is very important because today we live in an era which is full of inconsistencies and tragedies and manipulations, human degradations. And Ram taught how human values can be lifted.
Yes.
So my thought process is that as a reader of Ramcharitmanas, I read 2 pages every day.
Yes.
And that's what is important, because you always get a meaning that is so profound. And that's the lesson I have learned of Ramcharitmanas and Bhagavad Gita, reading many times over, is the fact that nowhere in both these texts, any character has been told to be bad. No, they have always taught us the lesson that if you do something like that, there is a consequence for that. And that's what the world is talking about today, that there is a consequence to your actions. And that's what is important for us to teach the world and reach out with that every action has a consequence. You have to live with it.
And in Ramayana, the most dramatic consequence is Ram kills Bali, right? And
yes.
But he grants him the boon, and then Bali, I think, is reborn as Jara, and he is the person who kills Krishna.
Correct.
The new form of Ram, the new avatar of Ram. So even Ram is subject to the law of consequences. And right. That is extraordinary, where even the gods are not able to escape from the consequences of your action. And so this kind of teaching where you're taught, look, you have to be responsible for your actions. You have to constantly try to lead a good life and make a world around you a better world. Especially in public life, this message is extraordinary. And I think Ram consciousness is going to grow, and people are going to go and start reading Ramayana. My prediction is there are going to be book clubs set up. Ram Katha will once again reverberate, and Ram consciousness is going to spread, and it's going to be the greatest force for good, the new force for good that will have been born on August 5th.
I think I will end this conversation about Ram consciousness and Ram Mandir construction in Ayodhya with a thought that you mentioned, which is very, very poignant. And that thought is that perfection and imperfections are 2 sides of the coin, same coin, and it will always happen. The question is not about getting deterred by imperfections, but to make it better, live with it, and get over it. That is the important part, because there is nothing perfect in the world. Nobody is perfect. As you rightly said, even gods have to bear the consequences of their action. So the question arises is that, we will. I'm very hopeful that there will be Ram clubs and Ram Charitmanas clubs, and people will study and reach out with the message. All right, that has been fabulous. Let's switch to a topic, a subject matter, which is very close to your heart and our hearts. We have done the 30 years of, on 19th January, we did a program commemorating the 30 years of, exodus of genocide of Kashmiri Pandits in Kashmir, and we completed 1 year of Article 370. Now, there are a lot of stories. The world has reacted as if we Indians have created the most evil torture of the minorities, Muslims in our country. And the world is looking at us, so much so that the Joe Biden, who is the presidential candidate for Democratic Party, is asking India to restore whatever they considered normal in Kashmir. And I suspect these guys have no clue. Somebody is writing their agenda. So before we go to that, give us your rundown on the Article 370, its abrogation. And I will add one thing, as a thought, that even when it happened 1 year ago, I was wondering, why didn't they separate Jammu from Kashmir altogether? That was a perfect time to create 3 union territories of Kashmir separate, Jammu separate, and Ladakh separate. Ladakh has become separate entirely. But why Jammu's future has been linked by linking it with Kashmir? So go ahead, your day.
So I think when you look at the 1 year anniversary, the big news is that this beautiful bird of Kashmir has escaped the python's clutches. This Article 370 python that had gripped this beautiful Kashmir, now Kashmir has escaped it. What has happened to the python? Let's start with that first. The biggest news is the fall of Saeed Jilani. Now, this gentleman, who was the face of the Hurriyat, the face of the radical separatist movement, the first person that all these NGOs and Western journalists would go visit, this person fell from grace. And you know what? There was not even a single tear shed. This man, through his actions, directly or indirectly, has been responsible for 41,000 deaths in Kashmir. That is the Indian number. Others say the number is larger, but it doesn't matter. 41,000 is 41,000 more deaths than were necessary. And it was he and his gang who took Kashmir in the wrong direction. And so, he got Pakistan's highest civilian award. And I sent a Twitter message to Prime Minister Imran Khan wondering why Jilani had been given a civilian award. Why not a military award? Because Jilani had done more for Pakistan than any of Pakistan generals who were able to deliver. But the fall of Saeed Jilani speaks more than anything else of how a fundamental shift has occurred in Kashmir. So let me make my second point. I had said in one of your earlier shows, when you had asked me how to fix the Kashmir problem, I had said, Vibhuti Jha, behaviors are driven by incentives. In Kashmir, for the last 70 years, it has paid to oppose India. If you opposed India, you got paid by the Pakistanis, you got paid by these Wahhabis in the Middle East, and heavens, you got paid by a confused Indian establishment also, as the Dullat doctrine amply laid out in his book. Horrible. Well, now that whole incentive edifice has crashed. I'll give you one simple statistic. In 2019, there were 2,000 stone throwing incidents. It was a money machine that was funding it. In the last year, have you seen any stone throwing incidents? The Hawala racket, the money funding racket, that has all ground down. The ecosystem has ground down. The government is now going to fire 500 to 1,000 corrupt officials. If you indulge in anti-national activities,
Right.
you will now be fired. Whereas previously, under Article 370, these guys were completely protected. So you're beginning to see a sea change. Terrorism is coming down. The number of local recruits is shrinking. The number of Indian armed soldiers and paratroopers and policemen, I'll give you the metrics because numbers matter. This year, we lost 35 security people in the first 6 months. Last year, we had lost 75. This year, we have 67 local youths joining the terrorist camps. Last year, it was 105. It's a 40% reduction. So every metric you look at, the numbers are coming down because of the fact that the local populace has realized that there is now no virtue in the game that was being played. Now, when these so-called leaders like Omar Abdullah, Mehbooba Mufti were put in house arrest or whatever, did you see a single tear being shed for them? No, because the local people have realized that these guys were feathering their own nest. But the biggest shock for the Kashmiris, the biggest shock for the Kashmiris was on August 5th. Because Pakistan foolishly decided to show a map where Jammu and Kashmir is now a part of Pakistan. Well, there goes the so-called right of self-determination out of the window. There goes that whole hypocrisy of JKLF that we really want Kashmir as an independent state. We don't want to be part of India. We don't want to be a part of Pakistan. Everybody knew that that was just a total lie. But now every Kashmiri understands it's going to be either Pakistan or India. And you know what? When you look at Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and they see that people there are eating lice, that the income there is 1/6 of what it is on the Indian side, it doesn't take too much time to figure out now, you know what? Our destiny lies with India. Now, yes, there is some stress because of the security grid in terms of educational system and other areas, but I predict that with the new lieutenant governor having been appointed, political activity will start. First, you're going to see local elections. Once the census is completed, you'll see the more important elections coming along. And so Kashmir now has a very different future, very different direction in front of it.
Well, one of the important things that comes out in this entire conversation is you said that Prime Minister Modi is doing an incredible job, and he is. I believe that too. However, if you listen to the critics, they are talking about one aspect, that is this current government also slipping into the process of appeasement, and they are not doing everything that needs to be done. And that takes me back to a conversation I had with a Pakistani friend of mine who had said that you Hindus are very sharif people. आप बहुत शरीफ लोग हैं. आप शांति के लिए कुछ भी देंगे. So somewhere along the line, we are not perpetual warriors. We are not perpetual killers. We are brave warriors. We fight for dharma. But is there a possibility that the situation might slip up because of certain considerations or concessions, or to appease the people? Because everybody makes the statement that take care of the youth, give them more. And I remember a very famous Indian television discussion took place, and they said, unko dena chahiye, unko include karna hai. But then those people don't want to get included. They want to be gaining their own stuff. They don't want to be inclusive. They are driven by Sharia. And the Sharia is not inclusive. I asked some of my Muslim friends, would you care to drop kafir from your language? No, they will not. The question is that so long as the education that happens with the children at the very early stages of their life, when they are brainwashed into dying or killing themselves, how does one confront that? Is there a possibility or a fear? What must happen to ensure that we don't slip into the policy of appeasement once again? Because here is an important element that we have to kind of contest and combat the thought distortions that happens at some point in time to gain a temporary advantage or a temporary tactical win, forgetting that the battle is bigger than what it seems.
So I think that you're right that we should not vigilance and internal vigilance is something you can't let your guard down on. Your concern is justified because throughout history, if there's one lesson that has been learned from the time of Prithviraj to Kargil,
right,
and now in Pangong Lake, the question is why are we not more vigilant? And so, yes, we have to be more vigilant. In the case of Kashmir, if the genocide of Kashmiri Pandits is not dealt with by this government frontally and fairly, then that is basically de facto appeasement, and that'll be seen as a win by the other side. So I think these are very good warnings that you're giving, and it's commentators like you who have to keep watch and make sure that India's leaders don't sacrifice the core interests.
I appreciate your thoughts. I sincerely thank you for saying what you said just now, because it triggers a thought in me. Because when we observe things, for example, Rohingyas, that beat the hell out of me. That whole of Kashmir was not available for resettling you and I, or normal Indian wanted to go there and do something. But somewhere along the line, the Rohingyas came, and they were all settled in Ladakh. Also to distort the political balance over there, create a Muslim majority. What I have found, Rakesh ji, is that being a sportsman, you are a sportsman too.
Yeah.
Never take your opposition for granted.
Yeah.
And when you are into something, you are playing to win. You are not playing for a draw. You are playing to win. And we have to get into the understanding of the challenge as it exists. Ghazwa-e-Hind, or wherever it comes from as a thought, exists. And we have seen that happen in India all over. Because India has become what I choose to call a phrase, not a happy phrase, but it's a happy hunting ground for every distortionist in the world. Whether you call it in the name of religion, whether you call it in the name of minority rights. Everything has been shot at India as if we are the sermonizing ground for the rest of the world. And it irritates me that the whole world media is silent on Turkey converting a library and a Christian place, a church, into a mosque. There have been opposition. There will be opposition. I'm sure there will be. Regardless of political correctness, there will be opposition to that. Are Muslims painting themselves into a corner? Because I find very few people are comfortable and happy about the way they impose themselves on wherever they go. Is that what is going to create a fiction? And this is something which we Indians need to be careful about. What is the design? Because enemy is always playing a game. Are we that smart? Are we that, I use the cricket language. There is a T20, you play it differently. You play one day international 50 overs differently, and then there's a 5-day test match. So we have to be prepared to playing the game in all three formats. And that's the key. Thank you very much for saying this one, but we'll switch over to our own adopted lands politics right now. And in a few months now, or 89, 90 days, a new president will be elected. There is a massive confusion going on because of coronavirus, no public speeches. The heat and the dust is missing from this year's election campaigns because Mr. Biden is sitting in his basement. Trump is doing his presidential thing, and debates are now being in a lurch. But the important question here is, which is what my question is, that 80% of the Indians vote Democrats. They are registered Democrats. And I have always wondered why. Because the values that we Indians generally cherish are conservative values. Looking after family, working hard, making ends meet, living within your budget, not a law and order problem. We have taken care of families, we have family values. These are essentially conservative values as we see in America. But why do we vote Democrat? And is this the time for us to review that stand? And I think it is time, primarily also because in reality, as I have seen the data, it has always been the Republicans, except Nixon and Kissinger era, where they have been more pro-India. Democrats have paid lip service to India because of their two policies. The entire Democratic Party's structure campaign revolves around unfettered immigration and giving things free, which is what attracts people. It attracts every immigrant. But then there is a cost, there is a price you pay for all of it. Are they taking the immigrants for granted? And is this the time for Indians to say this far and no further, a Lakshman Rekha to be drawn? Because Democrats have gone against Indian parliament, against Indian laws, and including the reality that CAA was to protect the minorities in the three countries, only the three countries. It's not all over the world. So how do we change the narrative, and how do we hit upon, and how do we make ourselves relevant in this election? Remember, there are many Indians in the battleground states where the win or loss is defined by 10,000, 15,000 votes. We are an important bloc today. We can claim a clout in most of the battleground states. So your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think there are three factors at play here. When you look at Indians in general, we come here and our dream is to do a startup of a technologically advanced company, become a CEO. We're professionals. And so those are the places, become doctors. We were frontline warriors in the fight against Corona. So that's what we do, and we are respected and we are very valued. But then you have another group of immigrants who culturally are trained through their religion and through their culture that what they have to do is seize political power. Because if they can seize political power, then everything else accrues to them. And so I think the first thing is uh, we're just not organized to fight the political power game in here. If you see the Democratic Party, virtually uh, every Democrat who was a presidential candidate had somebody from Pakistan or whatever in a very senior inner position, right? So that's one thing. Now, second, to the degree that we have representatives in the Democratic Party, it's fair to say they have confused every Indian in America. And the Ro Khannas of the world and others, they have really, really confused every Indian because one just can't figure out what positions they are taking. And then the third is the Democratic Party itself. I think if I was in Joe Biden's shoes, I don't have any objections for him making promises to any voting bloc that he wants to. Fine, go make any promises you have to make to get elected. What is confusing to me, however, is this absolute silence about the Indian voting bloc. I mean, I don't even care what he's government, but the fact that he has been completely silent about the Indian voting bloc in North America, which is affluent, and as you said, in the critical battleground states, they do represent meaningful numbers, and they do have a voice, and they do have influence. It's total apathy and neglect. And that, to me, I think is a big, big miscalculation on his part, on the Democratic Party's part. And we'll just have to see. Again, as we said earlier in the program, every action has consequences. But right now, your conclusion is right. I think the Democratic Party is at great risk of losing the Indian voter. And if that happens, that may turn out to be something that they may regret.
I appreciate your comment about the Democratic Party taking Indians for granted. Like it is like you don't matter. The entire thing has been a vote bank politics that people have played. That's democracy. Play or pander to the vote bank politics, that whatever it is. But Indians as a group have to become aware of that, just as the Indians in England became aware of the Labour Party taking totally anti-India stand with reference to laws passed in India by a huge majority in the parliament of another democratically elected country. And that's what has kind of made Indians angry, because I'm angry about one thing. You are a corporate guy. I have been in the corporate myself. But for a person like George Soros to make a statement at World Economic Forum that he's committing $1 billion and he's committing $1 billion he's committing $1 billion to destabilize the government of Prime Minister Modi is absolutely ridiculous. There has to be an international law that, George Soros reminds me of, a villain in the James Bond movie, a megalomaniac villain in a James Bond movie who has his own designs and has money to impact something and ends up losing. So George Soros is doing that with India, committing the funds and creating NGOs to destabilize, including Shaheen Bagh. And there are efforts being made to derail the Uniform Civil Code also in future to create disturbances in India so that, so-called minorities in India do not become part, their Sharia must be protected, their faith must be protected, can't become part of UCC. As the saying goes, there will be consequence to that. And I think these are elements that unites India, must unite Indians in this part of the world, that you cannot take individual actions of committing $1 billion to destabilize a duly elected government of a major democracy in the world.
So look, I think you and I both have enormous respect for Mayor Bloomberg, right?
Yes.
But if there's one thing that we learned from his presidential bid, it is at the end of the day, money really doesn't do anything. If somebody thinks that with $1 billion, they're going to shape the hearts and minds of the average Indian, they're mistaken. They're just going to hand their $1 billion to these maggots. Remember, I told you there are maggots who feed on this. They're going to hand them over, and that's fine. But the Indian voter, Vibhuti, is the smartest voter in the world. And every time there is an election, the Indian voter surprises you with their sagacity, with their common sense, and they act based on what they know is going to be in their best interest. So have no fear. That Indian voter is India's consciousness and India's greatest strength.
Thank you so much for bringing the sagacity of the Indian voter and the hopeful thing. And I always say that as a sportsman, I take nothing for granted. And to that end, I would say that, hey, George Soros, if you want to spend $1 billion of yours to incite a violence here or incite a violence there, that's fine. Go ahead, waste your money. But Indians are smarter. And to that end, I think Indians in America this time must exercise their smarts, as the saying goes. So with this, we will have to end. As always, all good conversations have to come to a close. We end today now. Rakeshji, thank you very much for your thoughts on Ram consciousness. Thank you for your words on Kashmir, that people will come together, and the hope that, and the belief that, yes, the megalomaniacs have no future on this planet Earth. So with this, have a wonderful week ahead. Friends, thank you for watching, being with us. Have a great week ahead. Be safe. Namaste.
And thank you, Vibhuti Ji. Wishing you in advance Happy Independence Day on August 15th.
Happy Independence to everybody. Thank you very much.